Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast. I'm Kim Skorupski here at Hopkins, looking at my friend and colleague, Rachel Walden. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Kim.
Well, Rachel is an assistant professor in orthopedic medicine here at Johns Hopkins. You might remember her from a prior episode that she recorded with Dr. Sarah Poynton entitled A Comprehensive Guide to the Fundamentals of Scholarly Writing. So check that episode out. Rachel has an MS, Master of Science degree, and an ELS, which stands for Editor in the Life Sciences. Rachel has spent much of her career focused on assisting faculty members with scientific writing and publishing. She, with Dr. Sarah Poynton, she's going to tell us a little bit about this, but she has developed a number of different formats and venues to help faculty members learn good principles of writing and publishing. Virtual sessions, 2-day in-person sessions, 1-day boot camp type clinics. She'll tell you all about that, how we do it here at Hopkins. And then you could get in touch with her and see if she could do a session or two for you at your institution, or give you some ideas of how you could start similar programs at your institution. But in the meantime, Rachel Walden just gave grand rounds and had a great topic there, and she's here to share some of that wisdom. So, Rachel, thank you again for being on the podcast again. And what was the title of that grand round session? And can you please share with us?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Kim. It's great to be back. And I'm very excited about this topic, which is how to be a better writing coach for your trainees. And there's a lot packed into that title. So a writing coach, what is a writing coach? And many faculty members do not think of themselves as writing coaches. They might think of themselves as the writer who bails out the less senior authors on a paper when that manuscript is in need of an overhaul, which is, of course, a very time-consuming process. And it isn't the ideal way for a trainee to learn the techniques and the skills needed to be a successful scholarly writer. So, a writing coach, we think about the coaching model from sports. It's something like a mentor, something like a cheerleader. And so it has these different components to it that are able to be learned, and we have tools that Sarah and I have developed to facilitate that coaching relationship. And what we talk about when we have a coaching session with to teach people to coach are first some things not to do. So not to write the paper over yourself, and not to, tread that line. It's difficult. Sometimes our feedback can be demoralizing to someone who is just learning this craft. So to come from a place of understanding that many of our trainees, that is residents, fellows, medical students, have not been taught how to write in a scholarly way. They're expected to do it. It's key to their success, and yet they've had no formal instruction in that. So when we remember that gives us a great starting point for that coaching relationship, that this is not something we're born knowing how to do. At the same time, a writing coach that is a more senior faculty member or someone who is a more senior author on that paper is not born knowing how to coach a junior writer. We don't necessarily have natural skills in teaching someone how to write. And so sometimes, and we don't have a lot of time, of course, that's time is at a premium. So of course, what we often tend to do is say, just send me the manuscript and I'll fix it. I'll fix
Right.
it. We get this in.
Right.
That's not great for either party. And so Sarah and I have thought a lot about this over the last few years, and we have been offering for several years now a virtual session on how to be a better writing coach for your trainees, where we introduce tools that can be used to help the trainee understand what the expectations are for the piece of writing. So Sarah has developed some wonderful rubrics that delineate for every section of a manuscript what should be included in that section, and how it should function within that section. So it sets some guide rails there for the writer that they can then follow when they're crafting that section. And also another rubric that is about basic style and form. Is the writing clear? And being able to focus in on the things, clarity and conciseness, cohesion, and what makes a manuscript compelling to a reader. What makes it interesting? Do they understand the big picture and why this matters? What the rationale was for your study and how it's a strong one? Are those things coming through in the writing? And what can they do with this information? So this idea of telling a story, the story of your study, how is that working in this manuscript? And that can be a hard thing to pinpoint, especially when you're struggling you're weeding through perhaps semantic issues, grammar issues. Sometimes that takes center stage, and it's very difficult to see the content beyond it. So these are tools we've developed to help both writers and writing coaches to identify those things, and for writing coaches to be able to give more objective feedback that's actionable. So we do that both in a 3-hour virtual session, and we've now developed a 1-day in-person session that we deliver, and we really get into those tools a little bit in a little bit greater depth and have some practice using them. So that's something I'm passionate about right now, because I feel that it's almost universal that we end up in these author groups, and the senior author is in a quandary. Do I either take the reins and do this myself, or do I try to give some feedback that may or may not be complete, may or may not be helpful to the writer? They may return another draft to me that's not a lot better than the first one. How do I articulate what the issues are? Yeah. And how can I spread around the work so that I don't have to do this for every section of the paper? So these tools also let you delegate that work a little bit.
Oh, Rachel, I like that last part about delegating, because that gets to the crux of most of our issue in academic medicine, that faculty don't have time. Nobody has time. Right. And so when you said earlier now how sometimes it seems it's easier and faster to just, I'll just do it myself. That whole I'll just do it myself in anything, any process, in the lab, in the clinic, in faculty meetings, in our offices, in any space, it oftentimes seems like it is easier, more expeditious, because it is. Because we think, by the time I tell her how to do it, by the time, just like with me, when I send appointments, people are like, well, who takes care of your calendar? I'm like, me. You're looking right at me. Let's just do it right now. Well, no, I'll contact somebody and we'll look at your calendar. I'm like, I can look at it right now. It takes me 3 seconds. But so in our trying to be efficient, I think that instinct is I'll just do it myself with that. And then we miss a growth or learning opportunity for the learner, because it takes more time. But that's kind of that moment where you're like, okay, I think it's subjective. As a coach, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of now like the mentor or the coach, where how close are we to the finish line? If it's literally some minor tweaks, then I'd be like, I'm going to go ahead and do these and say, hey, Rachel, here are the 5 changes I made, and this is why I think, it's your call. You're the first author, whatever, but I would probably do it and then help them understand why I did it. Right. And then another scenario might be where we're maybe further back from the finish line, and I have to say, Kim, don't be so impatient. This is a learning process. Help her understand that that's why you do the lit review, because the feedback you got was, how come you didn't quote so-and-so, a cite so-and-so and so-and-so, because they've already done this before. So this is a moment to pause and say, no, you need to go back and do that. So I think it's subjective, right? From the coach's perspective, that it on a case-by-case basis, it will depend. You don't always want to have a blanket approach with every learner, right? Every writer.
Correct. It does depend. It depends on the writer. It depends on the phase of the manuscript, as you said, how close it is to the finish line. It depends on, frankly, we can't force people to be motivated to, that motivation needs to be intrinsic. We can treat writers in ways that don't jeopardize that motivation or reduce that motivation, that aren't demotivating. And that's really important. And part of that is objectivity in feedback, constructive feedback, and encouragement and celebration of successes. So there's that part of it. But we really need to take it on a case-by-case basis. And for example, sometimes we think about developing one's voice as a writer. And that is a wonderful thing. And I love to read journals that preserve the author's voice in the writing, and don't have such a heavy editorial hand that it sounds like it was all written by the same person. So voice is great. Voice is wonderful. Some writers aren't at that stage yet where they need to be thinking about developing their voice. Some very, writers who are just very early in the process need to be mimicking good writing a bit to get the fundamentals, a grasp of the fundamentals. And then later, as more mature authors, as more experienced authors can start to find their own voice in the work. So I don't think there's one size fits all for that either. So some of it is a judgment call, and really knowing that writer, knowing having a brief conversation with them before they get started or near the beginning of the process about how they're feeling about it. And if they're taking a long time, there's a reason why. And might be important to uncover what are the mental obstacles they're facing. Sometimes it's a crisis of confidence. Sometimes it's a feeling that I'm just not ready to start. Sometimes it's, I don't have a big enough block of time. And as you know, short blocks of time can be the most productive when you have, string them together. So that's part of the coaching relationship, as well as having that dialogue. And it doesn't necessarily need to be time consuming to do that. It is a check-in that you can do with writers at key points in the process. And we've developed an 8-step coaching process or coaching plan that allocates a certain number of minutes to each stage that you should be spending with your writer or with the manuscript, so that it limits the amount of time. Not to say that you can't have to repeat some of those steps. So it can take a bit longer depending on the project, but it gives the coach a really good sense of, order of magnitude, how much time should I be spending at this.
That's brilliant. Before we get to those 8 steps, because I'd love to hear like a little teaser, a high level overview of those 8 steps in your coaching guide, Rachel. But what I loved how you put that so beautifully, a crisis of confidence, and how reminding us as senior authors or mentors, coaches, that remembering how it was when we were starting out and not being quite so confident in what is my voice, certainly, but what is my story? You said earlier, you talked about, the C's, all the C's, the clarity, concise, coherent, compelling, and what's the story? And I have found that a lot of times, and I'm personalizing this somewhat, but I've also seen this with early career faculty members, when you ask them, invite them to think about what is a story you're trying to tell in the specific aims of your grant application, or in this manuscript, what is the story? It's almost like their eyes get big because there's not one story.
Right.
Oftentimes it's a lot of complex interlinking stories. And that's when the kind of the panic sets in when you talked about that crisis of confidence. How am I going to convey this? It's too
Yeah.
much. It's so big. And you know what I found? I think I've talked about this before with you, Rachel, is when we had our investigator groups, the K investigator groups, the R investigator groups, and I'd have the specific Ames page review sessions. And we would oftentimes, put on our academic scientific hats and read all of our multisyllabic words. And I'd say, you know what? Let's turn it upside down. And literally, we'd all turn the specific page, Ames page upside down. And I'd say, Rachel, tell us, what are you trying to figure out? What's the question?
Yeah.
And they would just start talking.
Yeah.
And their eyes would light up and they would be gesticulating. And they'd be like, but I don't know about this, but I do know that. And what's missing is this. And it's like we're all sitting around with a cup of coffee and they're just talking. And then you'd see people around the table going, that, what you just said, that. And they'd be like, I don't know, what I just say? And then somebody's like, I wrote it down. That's what you want to say. And I guess I'm getting to the idea of the stories. If you can't, in writing, put it down, what is a story? Just start talking out like a normal person using everyday language. What story am I trying to tell?
Right.
And I think that once you find that story and someone goes, oh, I get it. Now I understand the story. Then you could say, okay. And maybe that gives us a little bit more confidence to begin.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wanted to, again, underscore what you just did for us, Rachel, which was so nicely taking us back to the beginning of the confidence that there's so many steps to writing and publishing, but oftentimes it's go back to the beginning of what is your story.
Yes.
And hearing, like sitting around the campfire, prehistoric days, tell me a story.
Right.
And then go from there.
Stories are key. They're how we remember information. And, that he described that scenario so well of someone whose manuscript is perhaps not clear or grant proposals not clear. But they're so able to articulate it verbally. And that's the case for many, many people, is that it's easier to tell a story verbally than it is to put that story in writing in a compelling way. And I had that very experience with one of our faculty who I met with as part of a 2-day writing retreat that we hold a couple of times a year. And she had sent me her manuscript before the retreat, and I'd had a look at it, and I did some edits and I had some queries, but I just wasn't quite understanding the big picture. And wait, why did this matter again? And how is this different than what we already know or what's been done? And it wasn't clear to me in reading this paper. And granted, I'm not an expert in her field. However, I was just reading it as an editor, as a technical editor. And we met one-on-one, a couple of days later. And I said, okay, this is what I'm just not quite understanding what the important message is here that you want people to take away. And she started talking, and just as you described, all of a sudden a light bulb went off for me. And I said, oh, wait a minute. So you're saying this? And she said, yeah. I said, put that in there. That needs to be in there. It's not clear. It's not coming through. And sometimes a writer is so close to the content. They're so knowledgeable. And the writing coach or the mentor, the senior author, can also be so close to the content.
And we make assumptions. We're like, well, duh. Why don't you say that? That's a duh moment. I'm like, no, don't test your assumptions about things being duh. A lot of things aren't duh. It's like, no, you need to hold the person's hand and walk very carefully with them so that they almost anticipate what the next sentence is going to be. Then they're excited. They're like, oh, I knew she was going to go there.
Yes,
awesome.
Exactly. They're following it. And that's narrative quality right there. That's a thread, a storytelling thread that's, woven throughout the entire manuscript. And that's what we respond to as readers. That's what we remember as readers. It all fits together like a puzzle rather than a bunch of jumbled pieces of information. And as you said, the story can be complex. And I would add that the audience can be complex and multifaceted. You're not writing for just one audience. You're never writing just for your primary audience, who is usually other experts like you. You're writing for other audiences. Who are they? We need to think about them, identify them, and keep them in mind as we're writing. It may be experts in another field that's related. In biomedical writing, it is always patients and families.
Right.
Whether you like it or not, it's
Right.
patients and families. So because all of this hopefully is in service to human health in some way.
That's right.
About biomedical writing. And there is no paywall for your abstract. That's going to be out there. So we want to make that as accessible as possible to the largest audience while including key content that needs to be there for the experts. So it's a balance. And I think striking that balance is something that an editor can certainly help you do. And as our senior faculty members become more skilled at writing, coaching, and guiding these authors, they can also bring a lot of that to the table too.
Wonderful. Can you tell us about the 8 steps and the coaching guide?
Yeah. So
briefly, you don't have to go into
briefly, very
I don't
briefly.
I don't want to sell your secrets.
Yeah, no, very briefly. The first step has to do with a content assessment, a high level review. You're not using track changes. You're not even making any changes to the manuscript. You might put some high level comments on there. Try to put your hands behind your back until you've read the whole thing. Resist the urge to start correcting things or asking questions from the start. And so you want to assess that high level content. And that should take about 20 or 25 minutes. And then we go into briefly assessing style and form. So how it's written. And that is something you can do in 5 or 10 minutes and just take a little section of it because it's going to be the same throughout. I can almost guarantee you. So you don't need to tackle the whole manuscript. And then the third step is to communicate with the author, draft a note to them or have a meeting with them where you start with something positive about the manuscript. And I can give you, tips on how to do that because sometimes it's not easy to find that starting point, to find that spark. And then tell them exactly what it is you need them to focus on in their next revision. So you're not throwing everything at them at this point, but I have some ways to help you ascertain what would be best for them to start with, and then give them a deadline for that revision and check in with them halfway or a couple of days before that deadline and say, hey, I've set aside time to review your revision on such and such a date so that they're accountable. This keeps the process moving because, as we all know, this process can take years if we let it. We need to keep that momentum going. And then the author revises the work. And then you review the revised draft. And again, it's content that you're focusing on at this point. And then you review for style and form at a later step. Step 7 is the author going back and revising that work again to the best of their ability, incorporating all of the feedback you've given them. This whole process involves rubrics or can involve rubrics, which can be really helpful, as I mentioned, in making sure the content is there. And then the 8th step is when you, as the senior author, are finally, and the writing coach, are reading through the entire paper and offering your final input on it. And that may take up to an hour. But this whole process is, it shouldn't take longer than that at that point, once you've been through these other iterations and these other steps. So each one of these also, by giving you an expectation for how long it should take, sometimes that makes it a little less of a formidable task because you think, oh, I have half an hour today. I'm going to make half an hour. I'm going to do this, in this afternoon. And I'm only going to spend half an hour on it. And Rachel says I can. So I'm going to believe that. And it's true. You can, again, a manuscript will expand to take as much time as you let it. But we need to be very focused and use some tools to assist us in reviewing as efficiently as possible.
That's great. Great. Rachel, could you please, you mentioned earlier the different formats and different offerings you've assembled with Dr. Sarah Poynton here at Johns Hopkins, but could you give listeners another general overview of the content that we have here at Hopkins with the eye that folks in other institutions could either, get in touch with you and ask you to deliver some content. You get a hold of her at Rachel Walden. It's Rachel Walden, WALDEN at jhu.edu. It'll be on the facultyfactory.org website. Again, Rachel Walden, DEN at jhu.edu. But could you give some overview of what we do here programmatically, and how folks could also, if they don't want to work with you but want to start it themselves, how would they go about finding someone like with your expertise, and how would they look internally for resources if they don't have the resources to look at external resources?
Yeah, right. So, well, internally, there are some editors who are, sometimes you can sort of smoke them out from the institution. They hide and sometimes are very much beneath the radar. But if you start putting the word out, most institutions, you will find someone, and they may know of others like themselves in the institution who they can connect you with, who are medical editors or medical writers. If you have resources to look elsewhere, of course, I love to consult on this, and I feel that Sarah and I have developed some really useful offerings. And the feedback we get is that these workshops that we have and the writing retreats are incredibly valuable. In fact, we get a lot of people repeating some of the retreats because they find it's what moves them forward in their writing skills and in their product, in having a submittable manuscript. So the board of editors in the life sciences is a treasure trove of others who are medical editors, certified medical editors. The American Medical Writers Association is another place, AMWA, where you can try to find medical writers. So there are a lot of them out there. It's a very established field now. It wasn't a while ago when I started, but it is now. So that's one thing. As far as our offerings, so we have 4 morning offerings. They are from 3-hour morning sessions that are held once a week for 4 weeks, and they cover all of the sections of your manuscript. The first one is actually on the principles of scholarly writing, scholarly scientific writing, and the next one is on the introduction and the methods sections. The third one is on the results and the discussion. There's another one on I missed in order, the title and abstract of your paper. So important. And how funny that I missed it, because it is something that we do that very few people do. And I credit Sarah with really opening my eyes to the importance of titles. Titles are sometimes perfunctory. We leave them to the end. We have a working title and it ends up being the title. Is it a good title? The title is the one part of your manuscript the most people read.
Will read, right.
Yeah. It's also the shortest part, so it's hardest to write. So we do those sessions, and they, like I said, those are virtual sessions. And then the in-person offerings are a 2-day in-person writing retreat where we have a portion of it that's didactic and talking about scholarly writing. Often we have, as I said, we have repeat participants. So we tend to refresh that content each time based on their feedback. They say, oh, can you do something about X, about table construction? And we say, absolutely, we can do that. And we develop that for the next time. So it's partly didactic. It's partly meeting one-on-one with an editor for feedback about your particular manuscript that you have in process. It's partly peer review, if you want to have that, and or protected writing time when those reviews are taking place. And so it's this really rich day that can get authors unstuck. We often have people who bring a manuscript to us that has been sitting for a little while, and it feels stuck, and it's been in the shadows hanging over them. They know it's there. It's stressing them out, and they need to move it forward. They want to move it forward. And one day or 2 days in this writing retreat, and
Boom.
they're on the
Yeah.
road again. You know?
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
The roadside assistance. I'm thinking of like having AAA for your car. Help, I'm
Exactly.
stuck on the side of the road. I can't get back on. I need a jumper cables. And there comes
Call in the
Sarah.
tow trucks. Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so it's very gratifying. Faculty are just they tell their colleagues about their experiences in those retreats and in the full day coaching session, and it's just one of the most rewarding aspects of my professional life is to be able to help people move forward and to give trainees the skills they need when they leave the institution, when they move on to their next post in academic medicine. They take with them skills that they wouldn't have gotten had we not offered these specific sessions. They're just so that's a wonderful aspect of this, that I think it really differentiates a medical school, a department, a program, when they can have an element of formal instruction in scholarly writing. I'm biggest fan of that.
Amen. Contributing to the confidence, growing and ameliorating the crisis of confidence. So I love that. If you can give nothing else, a gift to someone is you help them recognize their own gifts and talents. And that helping someone overcome that self-doubt is just so important. And I love how you do this work, and it's so personalized, it's so meaningful, and it has such profound impact in changing science and medicine, because it's that untapped potential that needs to get out there. And so you're helping so many people get the message out and find their voice and tell their stories. And so I'm so appreciative of the work you do here at Hopkins. You've made great impact. We have wonderful, measurable outcomes. And you and Sarah are truly gems. Dr. Poynton are gems in our program and in our School of Medicine. So thank you, Rachel. And thank you for being on the Faculty Factory podcast again. And if you want to reach out to Rachel, it's Rachel Walden at jhu.edu. You'll find her information on the facultyfactory.org website. And I'll leave the final word to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Kim. I appreciate it. I appreciate this opportunity, any opportunity to talk about this subject. It is the way science is communicated in writing. This is the way it's communicated. This is the enduring record of your work. And this is key. These skills are key to publishing, to promotion, to getting grant funding. These apply in all of those areas. So hence my passion around it, because it's this critical part of instruction that we need to be providing our faculty and our trainees in the medical system. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your passion and wisdom, Rachel.
Hey everyone, it's your podcast producer, Casey Callahan, with your monthly Faculty Factory podcast update. Please make sure to download our free newest Faculty Factory book called The Academic Medicine Starter Kit, Timeless Tips and Guidance for Early Career Faculty Members. It is free and right now available to download on the facultyfactory.org website. Visit facultyfactory.org to find it, and you can see a link there to the Amazon version as well if you want the print version. In addition, I wanted to let you know that as of August 2024, this podcast you're listening to has more than 88,000 total downloads and more than 13,000 total YouTube views. The Faculty Factory website has drawn more than 48,000 web visitors from users in 122 different countries. We want you to be a guest on our show, so please reach out via the Faculty Factory website and send us a message there.
Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more. Get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.